Okay, welcome. I'm going to, this is the mind map for what we were supposed to learn according to Cambridge, but now I don't have to worry about every little detail as much. And actually, you guys have learned this section here, most of it anyway, and we're going to work a little with the human effects. Which we've already learned some already. Okay, this is available if you want. This is OneNote, Biosphere Assignments Resources section. There's the mind map. That is what I am showing you now. So anyway, we have done a lot of this over here. Structures, processes, okay, NPP, GPP. I didn't worry about specifically looking at green and brown food chains. We've mentioned that many times. Brown being fungus, bacteria, things like that. So now that we don't have to worry about the Cambridge at the end of the year, I don't have to rush things as much. We can, even though I need like 2 years for all this stuff. Okay, so nutrient cycling with soils, right? Stuff dies, fungus, bacteria break it down. And I think my little blurbs here, my little succinct summations could be quite helpful for you guys. Okay, we have biotic, abiotic factors, climate, of course, and then there are limiting, some of these can be limiting factors. Okay, temperature, amount of water, like that. Then different biomes. I think Cambridge asked you guys to learn too many biomes. But now we can focus. I want to focus on our local regional biomes or habitats, which I saw in the newspaper on Sunday about the 10th anniversary of the Deepwater Horizon oil rig spill. And I thought, you know what, let's move on to that. It's a little more interesting. I love case studies. Okay, so for human effects on ecosystems, we have different stuff here from Cambridge. Dams, of course you're not going to remember everything, so but you guys have a sense about dams. Exploitation, our PDF. I gave you guys a PDF in the beginning of the year. Actually, it is on, that's Cambridge. This is Biosphere section, coastal and marine ecosystems. It's fantastic. So you have it available here. You also have a hard copy of that, actually. Okay, so I'm going to go back to notes right now because that's the Deepwater Horizon. A little something about that to start things off there. So anyway, exploitation, human effects, deforestation, water resources. We have a decent idea about that stuff, right? Water resources, the big three: agriculture, soil management. Okay. We've touched on deforestation, especially in the rainforest. Pollution, we have a sense of pollution. And agriculture is really the biggie. Stormwater runoff, mining. So you guys, if you go back to notes, you'll kind of have a sense of that stuff again. And now we're going to look at marine, which is important for everybody. It's becoming a huge issue, and definitely for our lives. And then next we'll do climate change, which is interesting. And then I'm not so worried about the effects of population growth. We'll see if we get to it. If not, we don't. You guys, you can see from here, we've touched on these things before. Okay, so let's get to this section, and I'm going to go to OneNote, and we're going to start with the 10-year anniversary of the Deepwater Horizon oil rig. It's about 40 miles offshore. Huge footprint from the oil, hundreds of miles of coastline. Our fish now, all the fish they test in our area, they can find remnants of oil chemicals, but not enough to harm us. They're mostly found in the liver of the fish they check anyway, liver and the bile. So the fish are edible, but for sure there's all kinds of chemical, and who knows genetically and in terms of development. who knows all the different effects. Okay, so I'm going to go down. This is Biosphere Notes section. And you can see I've made the Biosphere section assignments and resources. Okay, so just a little table. Then we'll just look at this. This is from Sunday's newspaper in the Tampa Bay Times, and that'll be what we're dealing with today. So a few notes here. Deepwater Horizon up there, 1 mile deep. That's very costly. Cheap oil, cheap coal don't really exist much anymore. They really have to use a lot more technology nowadays and more processing. More than 200 million gallons. Many hundreds of miles of shoreline affected. Economically hard. It's hard to estimate. So this is one oil, not a spill, right? This is from a mile deep underground in the ocean. So right off the bat, the government pledged $20 billion for efforts to deal with it. Exxon had about $40 billion in various costs, fines, lawsuits, everything. Some of that money did go to people, paying people to clean up. So that goes back in. The economic costs for the immediate and long-term reduced income, a lot of reduction in income. Some people were in businesses that were just holding on, that couldn't make it after that. Lost jobs with seafood or coastal businesses. They're hard to calculate, but around $30 billion. This is from the National Resource Defense Council, this website. They're pretty good. So that's around $30 billion. Fisheries, marine fisheries, $8 billion. Crabs, oysters, fish, shrimp, and tourism and brand name damage, about $22 billion is the estimate. This is up to about now. So that's one oil rig, one oil rig spill. I shouldn't call it spill. There should be some other name. So that's crazy. So we definitely will do well to move away from oil. Okay, and then the health issues for people, organisms in the environment, really hard to measure, because there's long-term issues that will affect a portion of people and organisms. And don't ever forget, when we talk about people, we're talking about developing embryos. There's a lot of damage that happens to the development of fetuses and embryos that are just hard to get data about. So that is that idea there. Now, this is the article. You guys are going to get a few questions from this. So, in my opinion, when people talk about the Deepwater oil disaster, you'll be able to have some meaningful thoughts. Okay, so you'll have to read this. One of the main points here, what happened was what they're calling a blizzard. Nice dramatic description. A blizzard of flocculants. Okay, and that is oil would stick with clay in the that came up from where the pressurized release of the well was. Oil will stick with clay and algae because the environment was the water quality was decreased. They develop a kind of a slime to deal with a poor water quality. So they all stuck together. So you got this massive blizzard, as they're calling it, or rain of this, what they're calling flocculate. It's like scummy, dying stuff. And that fell thousands of feet, all right? At the well site, it's a mile deep. And it fell thousands of feet deep into the ocean water column with all kinds of effects, okay? Including at the bottom, there's a layer. There's a layer at the bottom that stops growth of any kind of habitat. What's the word I'm looking for? Community, a bottom dwelling community. Even 10 years later, has not come back well at all. So really serious effects. And they mentioned this ring that occurred about 1,000 meters, like 2/3 of a mile down. Some of the chemicals in this in this oil, this crude oil that was released. Some of the chemicals are actually do mix with water. They actually do dissolve in water. And there's also toxic chemicals too. So really quite a serious deal. Okay, I feel I need to get to the end here. Also interesting, if you read, they released a lot of fresh water from the Mississippi River in order to try to push away this oil blizzard, and that had effects on oysters and shellfish for many, many years. And the effect on plankton is always very, very, very serious. But one nice mitigating circumstance is that new water from ocean currents bring in plankton, and so the recovery is pretty good for them. But you do develop this whole, you do develop a scummy zone of where all this stuff died. So that's a whole issue there. And so the Mississippi, this is the Mississippi was released here. I'm pretty sure I'm correct there. The Mississippi is released in the delta of Louisiana, and they let out a lot of fresh water, and it also had sediments, so that had a whole other, some issues involved there. Okay, I think I've talked more than enough. So you guys will develop some real solid knowledge, information about that oil spill, and we will carry it on. There's another oil spill in 1989, so what happened there? So we'll look at that. Then we're also going to look at red tide. There's red tide not only in Florida, it's all around. Not too much time, people, just some. And then also eutrophication, which is too many nutrients in the ocean. It's even happening in the ocean. So like the deep ocean. So we'll look at those kind of things, and then hopefully locally mangroves are super important, seagrass beds are super duper important, or seagrass meadows. And then I have some expertise for the Everglades, so maybe we'll look at that. And that should be relevant and a good knowledge base for you. And that's it for now. 12 minutes. Doggone.